Good evening, Willowdale and beyond. I'm Sebastian Biasucci. Welcome to Meet Your Neighbor, NeighborLink North York's live stream interview series. Each week, we introduce you to a new neighbor in the spirit of building a more connected community. And we've got a double feature for you today. We're thrilled to be joined by the local father-daughter duo behind the Food Garden Life radio show and podcast, Stephen and Emma Biggs. They both were recognized by Garden Making magazine as one of the green gang of Canadians making a difference in horticulture. And from giving talks to writing books to growing incredible produce, they are the real deal, and we cannot wait to chat with them this evening. Before we meet Steve and Emma, allow me to introduce your host, Lily Chang.
Good evening, Willowdalers. So happy to share this Monday evening with you. I have been looking forward to this evening's chat because they are near and dear to my heart. They have inspired my own gardening or foray into gardening. It all began during the first lockdown when I decided I wanted to plant a vegetable garden in my front yard. I had no idea where to start. I had a pretty large piece of land and lots of soil, and I had no idea how to plan a garden. Someone in our neighborhood connected me to Steve, and he has been a source of information and inspiration throughout my gardening journey. And so I'm so grateful that he lives in our neighborhood. He's so generous to share so much of his knowledge. And tonight we get to chat with him and his daughter, who have really made a name for themselves. We are so proud that they are fellow Willowdalers. They are also what I consider gardening gurus. So without further ado, let us welcome Steve and Emma Biggs. Hi, how are you guys?
We're
Fine.
good.
Thanks for the nice intro.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget. I was scared and overwhelmed looking at my plot of land. And Steve, you came over to my yard and you kind of just drew some lines, and that was the start of my gardening. So thank you so much for helping me out there.
You're welcome.
So it is March, and a lot of people are itching to get outside. Spring has officially begun. What are people up to these days in the gardening world?
Oh, well, I just planted up our cold frame a few days ago, so hopefully we will have some spring greens pretty soon. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about, I just saw some bulbs poking out in the front yard, and I put in a couple hundred flower bulbs last fall, so I can't wait.
Yeah, he went a little bit over the top. So
We'll have to schedule a walk by or a drive by to check that out when it comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Emma? What are you up to?
Well, he went over the top with bulbs. I'm going over the top with tomatoes. There's a few hundred varieties that I want to grow, but of course I can't fit them all. So I'm currently trying to figure out which varieties actually get a spot in the backyard, and then hopefully over the next few days I'm going to be planting them.
Did you whittle it down to 100?
I got it down to 111 varieties, but I still need to take it down a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't even know what kind of logistics or system you must have in place to keep track of that many different types of seedlings.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. I started a Excel spreadsheet just a few weeks ago to keep track of the tomato seeds that I have, but I'm gonna need to get some good system in place to keep track of all the seedlings.
So, for fellow Willowdalers that, maybe perhaps want to start a garden this year, what is something that people should start doing in March?
I would say garden planning. So just figure out what do you want your garden to look like later on in the year. What do you want to grow? And because some of those things, if you're growing them from seed, you should be planting them now, and you should be getting your hands on seeds like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants and some greens outside. And so just figure out what do you want that garden to look like.
Mhm. And for people new to it, pick what you like to eat. A lot of books recommend growing radishes, but I know a lot of people don't like radishes. So think about what you like to eat. And if it's the first time, maybe don't make it too big the first year. Just bite-sized chunks.
And if we don't have time to plant seedlings, will you be making your seedlings available online again this year?
Yeah, I will be. Thanks for asking. So I'm gonna be planting a few hundred tomato seedlings. I can only fit about just over 100 in my backyard, and so a lot of those will be for sale to anyone who's interested in some neat tomato varieties.
So, if you have 100 tomato plants, you must then harvest how many thousands of tomatoes?
A lot.
What do you do with all of those tomatoes?
I look back at the season every year and I wonder where they all went. I think we eat so many fresh tomatoes. I eat a fresh tomato sandwich or salad every day. We snack on them in the garden. The squirrels and the slugs take their fair share. They go to lots of different places.
And we
Yeah.
freeze lots and we share lots with neighbors.
Yeah. And then I
So
think the thing that drives dad crazy is that I save tomato seeds, and basically I take the tomatoes and I squeeze all the seeds out, and we're left with just these pieces of juiceless, seedless tomato that, the only thing they're good for is sauce. And so that drives him crazy that I cut them all open.
And do you make sauce and jar it?
we freeze them all and just make sauce as we go. I used to do jarring before we had kids, and then I got busy and I haven't done it since. So everything goes into the freezer.
That describes my life so well. And then I got busy when I had kids. A lot of things fall off when you have kids. So, Steve, when did you discover your passion for gardening? Was it before you had kids, or was it something that you discovered as you were raising your kids?
I liked it when I was a kid. My parents and grandparents gardened, so I did it with them. It was one of those things that I associated with family. And then as a teenager, I made money gardening for neighbors. And from that got me thinking about studying horticulture. So that was the path.
Oh, so it's been a calling for you, it seems.
It has.
And Emma, how about you? I'm sure you started when you were a baby crawling in the mud. At what age did you realize that this was something that you wanted to commit more of your time to?
Yeah, well, that's really how it started. Is that dad had me outside when I was little and just got me to do things that I enjoyed in the garden. He let me snack on things. He let me, make my own mud soup in the garden. And it wasn't really gardening at first, but it made me enjoy being out in the garden. And so as I got older and I was actually able to help, water things and harvest and plant, it was something that I really enjoyed. And so I guess as I've gotten older, it's something that I've just kept on doing and I still enjoy to this day.
It's so beautiful just watching the synergy between you. I've listened to your podcasts and met you guys in person, and just this shared passion that you have as father and daughter. And knowing, Emma, that you are a teenager, which for some parents, that's a frightening word, teenager, right?
Mhm.
But to see that you guys are able to have this together, and not just a shared passion, but really a shared business as well, with publishing books and having this podcast. How do you think that this shared passion has affected your father daughter relationship navigating the teenage years?
Who
I'm going to
goes
leave that
first?
to you.
It's great. It's nice time together. When we drive to the radio station, we're hanging out in the car, chatting. We can grab a lunch together. When we go to events, we speak together. So it's nice time together. But we don't agree on everything, do we, Emma?
No.
Like the parsnip seeds?
Yeah, he bought parsnip seeds, and I was like, "Why? Why would you do that? We don't even eat parsnips." So, and I always want to buy more tomato seeds, and I think that we should build more cold frames. So there's a few things that we do disagree on, but I love bouncing ideas off him.
I think
Well,
we
it
work well
just
together. Yeah.
I think it's so beautiful, and I'm sure many parents are envious of this, joint passion that you share and how it can not just serve your relationship, but also serve the community around you. You recently won the Landscape Ontario Garden Communicators Award, which congratulations. That's a beautiful achievement that you have.
Thank you.
When did this podcast begin?
We're in year 4 or 5 now. So it
Oh, I was
started
gonna
as a
say
radio
3.
show that we did monthly, and it was just once a month live radio. But then when COVID came, Emma was home from school. So we said, oh, well, let's just podcast and roll that into the radio show. So it's all one entity. So that's how we got going on the podcast.
And what has that development been? Because when you started it, I think podcasting has really trended up lately. I think there was,
Mm.
so you guys were kind of trend setting by starting a podcast together. How have you watched the development of this? Maybe it started as a hobby. How have you seen it grow?
I mean, it's a hobby for us because we love gardening. But I think it's also something that we love to do because we get to talk to really cool people that we look up to and we have really cool gardening questions for. So I think it's helped us grow because we get to talk to all these people and learn from them.
Yeah, it's a very powerful network that we've been able to build through the podcast. So I guess there's this selfish aspect to it too, where we get to call up these really amazing people who you wouldn't normally call up and ask them everything we want to know about their life or about gardening. So yeah, it's pretty special that way.
That's kind of how we're feeling about our baby podcast, Meet Your
Mhm.
Neighbor. Just a chance to talk to great neighbors like yourselves. I have another question for you, Steve. I know that you have built a reputation for gardening figs and lemons, which most people think is impossible here in Ontario. It seems like you keep reaching for a higher bar than most people would ever imagine. What is your goal for this gardening season?
Oh, I'm always trying new ways to keep the figs over the winter. So for people who haven't grown them before, the thing is they can take a lot of cold, but they can't take our winter extreme. And it just means that we have to be creative about how we keep them over the winter. So it could be in a garage or laid flat to the ground and covered with mulch. And so I'm always experimenting with new ways to do that and hopefully make it more simple, but it is still a lot of work. So I haven't quite got rid of all the work. But last fall, I dug a fairly deep trench and I'm growing my figs below ground. And so we'll see how that evolves this summer. That's my big thing I'm excited about this summer.
How many figs have you been able to harvest? Is it like, do you have a basket full? I can't even imagine a harvest of figs in Ontario.
Hmm. As we get into late August, they start rolling in and they keep going up until it freezes.
And how many plants do you have?
I don't know, Lily. It was up to, I had 50 varieties, so more than 50 plants. I had 50 varieties at one point, which was unintentional, but I wrote a book about figs. And then what happened is people started to write to me and say, could we trade cuttings? I'll send you this if you'll send me that. So, of course, I couldn't say no because I love growing these things. So it got up to this ridiculous number of plants. And I've been on a fig diet ever since. I've started cutting back. I don't have 50 now, so I don't know if I have 25 or so. And some are really good, and the trick is to find one that matures fairly early in the season, but also that has a taste you like too. If you think of something like apples, there's some that are just entirely different from others. There's green apples, there's red apples, tart and sweet, and same with figs. There's all sorts of different ones.
What made you decide to try planting figs? Because it's not a common thing.
Yeah, I had a neighbor with a fig tree when I was a kid, and I was talking about how I looked after people's gardens as a job. So I looked after their garden and got to see their figs. So that was, I guess, an early imprint of figs. But then when I was a student, I worked in the UK at a nursery specializing in figs, and that really exposed me to them.
That is amazing because now I feel like you are the fig tree expert of Ontario. Anyone who wants to plant one will buy your book, will probably contact you. How many people do you think are undertaking this challenge?
I don't know numbers, Lily, but I have seen so many people try figs in the last 10 years or so. I've seen a lot of interest, a lot of people trying it because I think for some people it's exotic, and then for other people there's some kind of connection with somewhere where family came from or somewhere where they've traveled, so there's some kind of connection to a different place too. So I think that's why there's this fascination. So a lot of people.
Mhm. And so then by extension, how about lemons? When did that passion get introduced into your life?
So the same neighbor who had a fig tree also gave me a lemon tree. And the lemon tree he grew from a seed in 1967, so it's older than me. And it's kind of special because it was grafted by one of the people who ran Peary's Fruit Market. And for longtime Willowdalers, that was at Young and Church. It was a greengrocer. So there's a little bit of Willowdale history in this old lemon tree. And so I still have that. And but that's what got me excited about lemons. And so for people who are curious about lemons, they share with figs this thing that some people don't know, is that they can take more cold than you think. People think, oh, it's tropical, but a lemon tree can go down just a little bit below freezing, which means that when it comes to keeping it through the winter, you don't actually need a hot greenhouse or a bright south window. You could put it somewhere like an insulated garage that only drops down to around freezing. Or I have a friend who keeps a lemon tree in a bright attic window. So there's lots of different things we can do. And I've had fun with lemons. I went from just a normal lemon. Myers lemons is another type. These are these smaller, very fragrant, sweet lemons. There's Ponderosa lemon, and they're really big ones. So it's a fun hobby too.
So you've planted different kinds of lemons as well?
Yes. And so, just in case people are wondering, I haven't planted the lemons in the garden. They're all in pots, and I stow them all away for winter. So I have a right now I have a little greenhouse that goes down to about freezing, and all the lemons go in there. But in previous times, before I had that greenhouse, they'd go in the garage where it was insulated, so it would be at about zero and it was dark, and I'd keep them there. So there's different ways that you can keep them.
Do the leaves fall off in the winter?
Sometimes, if you bring them into a hot house, especially, the leaves will fall off because it's so dry in a house, but they usually grow back in the spring.
That is amazing. And I guess this love of variety is something your whole family has because Emma, I have learned about so many types of tomatoes from you. I think one of my favorites is, oh, I can't even remember the names of the tomatoes I bought. It's like has stripes on it. Bumblebee.
Sunrise bumblebee?
Yes,
Mm.
yes. That's my family favorite now. I think I could
Nice.
just plant a whole garden of sunrise bumblebee. What is your favorite out of the hundreds that you plant?
Well, that's the impossible question, and I have no idea. But sunrise bumblebee is definitely one of my favorites, and I think a favorite for the whole household. And there's a few other good cherry tomatoes that I like. There's one called Rosella, which is a really nice little purple cherry tomato. And the flavor is just really sweet and rich and delicious, and the plant is really productive. So that's a really good one. And
Oh,
then Let's see, what other ones come to mind? There's so many. How do I choose?
Mhm.
There's one called Lucky Tiger, and it's an elongated cherry tomato. So it's kind of long. It looks a bit like a paste tomato, except a bit smaller, and it's green with red and orange stripes. And so that's a really pretty one, and it's really sweet and delicious too.
Wow, I have to take some notes of what to order from you. Where do you source all your seeds for such a wide variety? Because these are not the type of tomatoes you can find easily.
Yeah, well, it's a l I get them from everywhere. Everywhere I can find tomato seeds. I order a ton online from seed companies in the spring, so I go through their seed catalogs and their online websites and I say, "Hey, that tomato variety looks good. Let's order it so I can grow it." And I also love to swap with neighbors, and there's also bigger organized seed swaps so you can find through the mail and through CV Saturday events that happen all across Canada, and so I do that. And then I also have a few gardening friends that I send seeds to, and they send me seeds. And so it's just kind of sharing all the neat tomato varieties around, and you end up with some pretty neat ones.
Yeah, it makes you really think, why are we so limited in the types of tomatoes we can buy at the grocery store? Seems like, yeah, just the same kind everywhere. And you are helping spread the gospel of better tomato varieties for all of us. What is the gardening community like here in Willowdale? Have you connected to other avid gardeners, or is your network primarily the greater Toronto or North America?
I'd say it's probably North America, and we've even been reaching out beyond that. But there's lots of avid gardeners here in Willowdale, and there's one neighbor on our block, Joe, who has his backyard. I don't know if he has any grass, does he, Emma? Maybe a
I
little,
don't think
just a little
so.
pathway.
Yeah, that's it.
And he's got pole beans all around the yard. It's all tomatoes and peppers. There's grapes. And so he's been a big inspiration to us and shares seeds with us, things that are precious to him that he brought back from Portugal over the years. And so that's just an example. There are some avid gardeners around.
How do you think gardening can help build community?
Well, we all eat. And so I think for me, gardening and food and community, they all fit together hand in hand. But it doesn't have to just be food plants. I think there's a place too for flowers. And I converted my front lawn into a garden a few years ago. And so there are flowers there as well as vegetables. And just it's interesting to see people stop to look at the flowers. And as I was building it, and even now when I'm out there working in the garden, it's such a great way to connect with people. And I found that in the past, people who might have been reluctant to chat and engage in conversation, when I was out there gardening, might stop and chat. So I think gardening has that possibility. It's a way to connect and bring people together.
Mhm. And if I'll add on to what Dad says, I was kind of thinking the same thing, is that it's about the people. I think that a lot of gardeners really love to share their ideas and how they garden because there's so many different ways to do it. Even with, let's take tomatoes for example. There's 100 different ways that you could train your tomatoes and so many varieties you could grow. And so I think gardeners are often very eager to share how they grow things, when they plant things. Let's share some seeds or some cuttings. And so I think just by doing that, you meet a lot of people, and that is what grows community.
I think about teenagers, and generally, gardening is not the first hobby that you think of when you think about a teen. How is it when you share this passion with your peers? Do you find that there are other teens that are interested in digging in and giving it a try? Or is it something that people maybe feel like, oh, it's so different?
I think I get a bit of both. I think a lot of people are really excited about the food that they get to eat from the garden. So if I bring them fresh tomatoes or I bring them ground cherries, which for people who haven't tried them before, they're like candy basically. They're delicious and you can grow them at home in your garden. And so bribing people with homegrown veggies is a really great way to get them to see gardening as something that's really cool. And yeah, something I hope to see is more teenagers, more young people gardening and just learning about, where food comes from.
Well, these days, mental health and anxiety have really been a challenge because of lockdown and pandemic. And how do you think that gardening can help people with anxiety and mental health difficulties?
I would say it's just a nice place to kind of go and escape the stresses of everyday life. I know that I find it's my favorite place to go after school. I'll just go home, set my backpack inside, and I'll go out and I'll garden. And it's just really nice to be out there, away from my homework and away from my phone, and just kind of relax and do something different, get some fresh air, listen to the birds.
Yeah, I know that for me during lockdown, there were times where I was overwhelmed by what was happening, and just watering my garden was like an exhale for the day, right? You're just like
Mhm.
seeing things grow, and just that feeling of soil. It feels so real when so many things are spinning out of control. And the news these days is very difficult to digest. I think that tactile experience would be good for all of us to return to when the world seems overwhelming.
Yeah.
What in a Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Well, you said tactile experience, and I was thinking sometimes doing things with our hands can be a good way to unwind. So I agree with that. That whole tactile experience is very important, whether it's touching the soil or pulling a weed. Yeah.
I feel like it also is empowering because it's a miracle, really, if you think about how one little seed can produce so much fruit. And in each of those tomatoes, there's hundreds of more seeds. So every plant, every time I would see something come out of the soil, you're like celebrating the miracle of reproduction, of life. It is very healing, I think, for our spirit. And maybe at this juncture, many of us are needing something to remind us of, there's some part of life that can be beautiful and that we can participate in. How have you seen, I know that like you've interviewed so many people. What innovative programs have you seen that connect people and gardening in new ways?
Hmm. I don't know where
Where
to
do we start?
start. Well, so we spoke with someone from CAMH in the in a fairly recent episode, and they have a big garden on the CAMH property. And so some of the people at CAMH work this garden, but not only that is that they have a market weekly. And so this is a way that they can, it's like a bridge to the community where people from the community come to the market, they get to see the garden, and people connect. So that's an example that jumps out for me. What comes to mind for you, Emma?
Yeah, well, the first thing that came to my mind was we've talked to a lot of people from school gardens from all
Mm.
over North America who are just have have made these really neat programs that get kids outside and into the garden, and in many ways have incorporated the garden into the actual classroom and learning. And it's become more than that too. It's become extracurricular. Some of them have markets and programs that run through the summer for the kids. And I think as a young person, it really excites me, and I'd love to see that across more schools. And so that's something that jumped out at me.
I have also read about programs where they're encouraging more public space to be used for growing food. Usually, you see a lot of perennials in public gardens, but I always think it'd be way more exciting to walk by an herb garden, be able to pick something off rather than just seeing flowers. I mean, flowers are beautiful, but what do you think about that trend of growing edibles in public gardens?
Yeah, well, I was extremely happy this summer because walking around the neighborhood and other parts of Toronto, I actually did see some edibles. I saw some beautiful purple kale growing in containers on the Toronto Islands, and then I saw some sunflowers and nasturtiums in some other containers growing by the Douglas Snow Pool. And I was really happy to see that. And so I hope that this year, when I go and check out the containers, I see more edible crops like those, and maybe educating people to say that, hey, these actually are edible. You should go out and eat them would be great too.
That makes me think of the Dempsey Park close to us where they had ornamental kale. And I think that's how it was planted. At least that's how it looked. But I did notice leaves going missing. And so I was thinking, well, that's cool. That's good. So somebody knows what that is. Somebody is enjoying it. And maybe if we talk about having more food in public places, it doesn't have to look like a conventional vegetable garden, because I think people like the ornamental too. It could be something like that.
Is that something that the city has to implement, or are there guerrilla planters out there that go out and plant seeds at public planters?
I feel like there's both, because
Mm.
I think that the planters I saw were based on the city, but we actually talked to someone on the podcast not too long ago in the UK who kind of did that with her neighbors. They went out and they planted a whole bunch of edible crops throughout their whole city in public spaces. And I think that there's probably a bit of that going on around here too.
Yeah, and
That is
that was an exciting one. It was the Incredible Edible Project out of the UK, and there's a wonderful TED talk. But what they did was that they used food plants as a way to rally the community, and what they found was that it was the people who would push the initiative forward, and then maybe after people had, probably without asking for permission, put in gardens and food plants, then the town council would come along and maybe put in a bench. And so I don't know whether we should always wait for things to happen from the top down.
that is a very exciting possibility, right? Get a few people who have a rebellious streak and then just paint all of Willowdale with with edible seeds and see the crops that come out and the type of engagement. I know my mom, she used to go to a river near us. I grew up in Brampton, and she would harvest watercress. And I don't even know who planted the watercress there, but she was so excited when she found it. And then every summer we would have watercress. So
Hmm.
I think it's so wonderful when there is edibles that are in public spaces that everyone has the chance to interact with.
And there are some already growing too. I think of a hawthorn tree that I know of not too far from here, and I've seen people there harvesting those to make jams or something in the fall. And I see people picking dandelions or some of the edible weeds that are out there too. So it doesn't have to be entirely conventional vegetables too. If we're talking about food and the bigger picture, it could be all of these other things that might already be growing.
Right. There are some fruit. I don't even remember what the name, service berries, I think,
Hmm.
on Beecroft.
Yeah.
And they're so sweet. And I remember one time I was with someone and I was picking them, and they were scared. Are those poisonous? How do you know you can eat them?
Hmm.
There could be a fear for some people of just plucking something off the street and not knowing if it's edible or not. What is a good way for people to identify plants and to know if they're edible or not?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point to bring up, because you should always proceed with caution. You shouldn't just go and eat random plants if you don't know what they are. But there are a lot of plants in our neighborhood that are edible and you should be eating. And so I think books are always a good place to go. There's a lot of great foraging books out there. So I guess we're kind of urban foraging here, but they'll cover lots of the trees and the plants and the mushrooms and other things that you might find around.
And just hang around people who love food and do that kind of thing.
Is it possible to do urban foraging in Willowdale?
Sure. And I think those service berries that you talked about would be the perfect place to start. But there are other edible things too. So, for example, my neighbor has in her backyard a massive black walnut tree, which most people don't eat those nuts, but you can harvest those and you can eat them. There's all those edible weeds. I was mentioning edible weeds before. There's lots of them out there that are edible. And I'm trying to think of other berries. Even the little barberry bushes that are sometimes grown as an ornamental have these little berries that can be used in cooking. So there's lots of things out there once you stop to learn about it, and lots of foraging opportunities for sure.
Yeah, actually, so with my neighbors, we have a mulberry tree on our street. And now we have a tradition every year. We'll get out a ladder, put tarps on the ground, bring out broomsticks.
Mm.
Everybody gets really messy. The kids are stepping on the berries as they try to race to pick them. And it's just a beautiful experience that the kids on our street are sharing every year now together. So maybe we'll have to have like a urban foraging tour of Willowdale one day so that more people know what's available.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a great idea. And still thinking about that idea of fruit trees and what you were just saying about the mulberry tree, there's a community orchard here in Toronto. It's at Eglinton and the Allen, and they turned an unused park into this community orchard. And so there's fruit bushes, there's fruit trees, but I think we were talking earlier about the idea of people and community, and it's also become a hub in that community where people will go to do things together. So they have a big harvest table there, and it's become a really fun place.
I would love to see that happen in our community. I think it would really, especially for condo dwellers who don't maybe have as much interaction with the earth, to be able to have an orchard, to gather, build community, to eat. Sounds like a beautiful idea. We just need to find a patch of land that's still available. It's very hard in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What gardening initiatives would you like to see happening in our neighborhood?
Oh, I have to put in a plug for chickens because I think it's going to council soon. And there's been a pilot project, I think, in 4 city wards where urban hens have been permitted, and but they're not allowed in Willowdale. So I think that is soon going to council, and I'd love to see those rolled out across the city because they fit in so well with the thing is chickens fit in so well with gardens because there's this beautiful circularity where when you're say peeling the leaves off a cauliflower or a broccoli, those can be fed to the chickens make manure which you can then use to enrich the soil. So there's this great circularity to it, eggs aside.
Yeah, and who doesn't like fresh eggs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mhm.
what are the barriers, do you think, for people to accept that across all of Toronto?
I think maybe mindset partly. I think it's partly mindset. I even remember when the Parkview neighborhood garden was being discussed at a community meeting, and I was very surprised that a couple people were just adamantly against it and wondering if it could be hidden or would it affect real estate values because the mindset was, I think, that a vegetable garden should be out of sight. And maybe this idea of trying to step away from food production is a way to move forward. But I think it's the other way around. I think being closer to food and understanding it is very important.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the Parkview Garden. I walk by all the time with my kids, and we discover new things every time we walk by. So I'm glad that that was passed, and I hope that chickens are passed. I don't know. I do know some people are afraid of noise or smell, but are those valid concerns, or what
Those
are
are
the, yeah.
Yeah, those are good questions. Well, from the noise angle, it's when you have roosters that you have a lot of noise. So I believe the wording, if they were to roll it out across the city, would specify should be hens, not roosters, and that addresses the noise issues. And they really are quiet. So we've had them in the past, and they're you barely know that they're there. Far quieter than pet dogs. So I think the noise, for those who are a little bit unsure about the noise, I wouldn't worry about that. They're very quiet. And then from a smell perspective, Smell isn't a problem. And the key thing is if you're keeping chickens, you do want to keep them clean. And so it's no different from if people have, say, pet dogs and they don't take care of the yard and clean up after them, then that's going to smell too. So I think with proper care, smell isn't an issue.
Well, that's very good to know because I think, yeah, people might have some trepidation. How
Mhm.
can we support this being passed? What can people do?
Well, I think the big thing to do right now, because it'll soon go before council, is just to let the councillor know that you like this idea, that you think it would add to our community and really close the loop on local food production.
And I should add too, I think it's going to council on the 24th. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
that's the
so
date. So really
I
soon.
think it goes to committee first and then to council. But
Okay.
yes, so send a note to the
Like
councillor
now.
like now to express an interest. And then there's also a group called Toronto Urban Growers, and I believe they have an online petition to collect support for this initiative. So if you Google them, Toronto Urban Growers, you can track that down too.
Yeah, and then their website also has some more answers to any questions that you might have about keeping urban hens. So if you are wondering and you want more information, that's a really great place to go.
So as soon as it's legal, you guys will have a few chicken coops in your backyard?
I think we would have one chicken coop with 3 chickens. I think that's what I saw in the proposed recommendations. So yeah.
That's great to I hope it does pass. So we
Hmm.
just have a few more questions, and more relating to your experience of our neighborhood, in
Mm.
Willowdale. What is your favorite place to hang out? I think I know the answer, but
Who's going first?
I mean, I would say the backyard, but if I had to choose somewhere else, I'd probably say the Burnett Woods. I love it there. Just walking around, enjoying outside.
It's a beautiful spot. That's a nice mature forest. But I was going to say backyard too. We love our backyard and we spend a lot of time in it.
it really is magical, your backyard. I remember when I first visited, I thought, wow, I can't believe such a magical place exists in, suburb urban area. You guys almost have a farm back there. What is your favorite place to eat? Oh, this might be a similar answer.
Oh, so I was I would have said my favorite ramen restaurant at Young and Church, but it closed during COVID. So I think
Oh,
my second answer would be Paisanos on Willowdale because it's been there forever, and my mom and dad used to take me there, and just nice memories and good food. What about you, Emma?
I really like going and getting shawarma. There's somewhere on Park, on Young Street by Park Home.
Yeah, okay.
It's let's see, on the east side, I think,
Young.
and it's really good. I love getting it and then going and eating in the park or in the backyard.
they do have really good shawarmas. What is a hidden gem in Willowdale that more people should discover?
Oh, I think so. We talked about the Parkview Neighborhood Garden, but right next door to it is a really cool historic house, which is the John Mackenzie House. And it's a city owned house, but it's the headquarters of the Ontario Historical Society. And it dates from the early 1900s. And whenever there's a doors open, I'd encourage you to go check it out because it's a really cool house. And it's a really great group that operates out of there, the Historical Society. And it was, people talk about the monster houses of Willowdale. It was the first monster house of the 1900s, I guess.
How about you, Emma? What's your hidden gem?
I think that I love the Gibson House. I've been in there many times and I used to do kids programs there, so that's another historical house for you. But that's always a fun one to visit. And then my other one would be it's not so hidden, but I love going to the library and checking out books and hanging out there with friends. So that's a good one.
We are really lucky to have such an amazing library in our neighborhood. What's one thing you'd love to see more of in Willowdale?
Oh,
Gardens. That's definitely mine. More of those fruit bushes and edible plants around, more people foraging and more people having gardens and chickens, I hope.
I'd say gardens too. I think there are some neighborhoods in the city that have maybe more of a culture of gardening than we have here. North York still has, Willowdale especially, has a fairly suburban feel with a lot of shrub and lawn aesthetic. So I'd love to see more front yard gardens.
That's the music to my heart. I'm like, why grow grass? No one lies down in their grass in their front yard. No one has picnics there. But if you're
Mhm.
growing food, everyone can enjoy it. So I'm slowly working on trying to convert my own neighbors. So
That's great. You did such a great job with your front yard too.
well, yeah. The first year was probably better than the second year. I still have a lot to learn.
Well,
And
I
what
think that's how the garden goes. It's kind of you learn everything as you go. Some years are better than others. So for people out there who, maybe had a less successful year in the garden or they've had better years, just remember that is that I have down years and my tomatoes all get disease. So just remember that the garden is you learn more every year. It's not perfect.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of life and gardening analogies that can be made. You can learn
Hmm.
so much. Is there a few that have really struck you as you've been gardening? Revelations for life?
Well, I think gardening is an act of optimism because you don't know what the weather will be like. You don't know what bugs or pests will come along. So I think there's that whole optimism piece. And then, like Emma was saying, that each year is different, and some years go better than others. And you keep learning as you go, though, and it evolves. So I think maybe in life, it's easy to get into a rut, maybe, and not branch out. And in gardening it could be the same, but in gardening too we can also expand and learn new things. So I think that's a, a good a good thing to mention.
Hmm. How about you, Emma? What have you learned about life through gardening?
I mean, there's so much, but I think one of the big ones is patience because
Mhm.
tomatoes don't grow overnight. And it takes months from when you plant them until you actually get to eat that first fresh, delicious tomato. And so just the good things take time and put all your hard work into it, into whatever it is, not just gardening, but whatever your dream is and what you want to do. And nurture it, and good things will happen.
Beautiful lessons for us all to keep. Last question. What is your most memorable Willowdale moment? And maybe it's a gardening moment.
I was thinking about a special moment, and what jumps out to me. So here in our immediate neighborhood, we started a neighborhood association, and one of the things that we started to do was to have an annual picnic in Dempsey Park on Canada Day. And so there's a couple of those that really stick out in my mind because it was pretty special. We had the barbecue set up, there were neighbors coming out, chatting, talking, and so that really sticks out in my mind.
Oh, I think that's so beautiful. I feel like every corner of our community needs that,
Hmm.
the gathering of people over food. How about
Mhm.
you, Emma? What's your most memorable Willowdale moment?
Yeah, well, the one I had thought of earlier was the farmers market because I love going there. I love seeing all the stalls with, nice local food. And I would always meet my grandfather there and we'd, walk by all the stalls, get some fresh watermelon, which is my favorite in the summer. And so that was nice just to see so many people about and, see neighbors there. But something I just thought of too was the Cultura events that used to happen in Mill Aspen Square
Mhm.
with the food and the music and the entertainment, and that was a lot of fun. And so I think just all those events and times when we see all the community members coming together.
Yes, we can't wait for some kind of normal to start again this summer. I think all of these events are going to happen again and we'll be able to be neighbors again in face-to-face interactions and maybe we'll be able to smile at each other without masks. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending this evening with us. I have been really inspired since I met you, but also with this conversation, just your passion, your love of food, and your support of community. These are beautiful things, and we celebrate the success that you've made in the gardening industry and in the gardening community. So thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing more about your gardening adventures in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice chatting with you.
Oh, before we go, Emma, you have a special going on with your book. Maybe you could share with us what that special is.
Oh, yeah. So, for people who have kids and want to get them excited about the garden, my book, Gardening with Emma, which is the most recent one, and then the one that Dad and I wrote before that, which is also about gardening with kids, plus a few packets of seeds, is an offer that we put together. So, you can find that on Dad's website, stephenbiggs.ca or foodgardenlife.ca. And yeah,
The
anything to
perfect
add? What did I miss?
Foodgardenlife.com.
Okay, sorry. I'm not a very good.
foodgardenlife.com.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And the perfect birthday present for anyone who has a birthday party in the spring. And more people are having birthday parties now. So,
Mhm.
all right. Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to tuning in to your future podcast. Who's your next interview?
Well, coming up this week is with the Plant Share Grow a Row, which is a fabulous program that helps people who are growing food at home or in community gardens share it with food banks or soup kitchens or organizations that can use fresh produce instead of canned produce. So it's a fabulous idea.
That is wonderful. We surveyed all the people that we're serving right now through our food bank. And one of the key pieces of feedback we got was that, a lot of food bank recipients don't want to eat cans and carbs. They
Mm,
want fresh food. So that sounds like a beautiful initiative. And we will all have to check it out at foodgardenlife.com.
okay.
Thank you so much and have a wonderful night. Thank you, Willowdale, for tuning in. And now we're going to welcome back Sebastian.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Emma. That was awesome. A little bit controversial. I'm not a tomato fan, I'll be honest, but after hearing
Okay.
this conversation, there are clearly like so many tomato varieties I've been sleeping on that I need to discover. I've never had like my mouth water thinking about a tomato before, and that happened. So thank you. I'm gonna go check out all those really awesome tomato recommendations you gave because I don't know. I have a feeling I'll be a convert. So thank you. And I once had a conversation with a descendant of the Cummer family, who were like an early pioneer family of Willowdale, and they had told me that when Willowdale kind of got settled, it was because these Pennsylvania German farmers basically walked up Yonge Street from what is downtown Toronto now and found all these big, beautiful black walnut trees. And they knew that because of the walnut trees, that meant that the soil was really, really great. And they started to build their farms here. And that's kind of how Willowdale grew into an actual a settlement or a
Oh.
town. So it definitely has been a good place to grow for for hundreds of years, and definitely thousands of years when Indigenous people were farming the land too. So you guys are keeping that going here in Willowdale, which is where those kind of roots started of this area. So that's so awesome to see. We're so grateful. People can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and the website foodgardenlife.com is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. And be sure to keep up with Stephen and Emma's gardening adventures. You can follow them at Food Garden Life, as well as at @EmmaBiggs_grows. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at NeighbourLinkNY. And that's all she wrote. We will be back next week with another episode. We hope to see you then. Same time, same place, new neighbors. Good night, Willowdale. Have yourself a wonderful week. Good night.